Hello and welcome to FISHTORY. I'm Alexander Williamson, and today we're going to be talking about something kind of controversial. We're going to be talking about what the best substrate is. And to find out the answer to this question, and it's a subjective one to be fair, depending on what your goals are, if you're trying to make a biotope of a river, it might be large boulders and sand, and that may be fine. But if you're trying to create a planted tank with fish and a community fish, medium to small, nano fish and community fish, whether it's angelfish and some plants, a little bit of color, if you want to create something like that, or an aquascape that looks professional, what is the best substrate for plants? That's what we're getting at today. And to answer this question, I want to look at it from a holistic point of view. So I am a big fan of jungly, overgrown nature tanks, but I also have a background in aquascaping and doing very simplified, carpeted landscapes with a few stones, like Iwagumi style, or doing full-on Dutch style where you've got CO2 running and highlights. But I also do medium light to highlight, low tech without CO2, without even filtration. And through it all, what is the best substrate for all purposes? And it has been a long journey for me to figure out the answer to this question. And for a long time, I thought it had something to do with capping the surface and having different kinds of substrate with different properties and different layers. And after consulting with a whole lot of experts, everyone from soil biologists to geologists and botanists, I've kind of changed my opinion, and it's a little controversial actually, because it's something that's quite frankly easy, and it's something that's marketed to us aquascapers. That's aquasoil. And I am a big believer in keeping a holistic ecosystem in your aquarium. Not just having a cycled tank, but having a seasoned tank. Having all sorts of little microscopic life forms that are helping you break down nutrients and waste and utilizing it in the most effective ways possible, plus just creating a robust and fascinating little ecosystem in your aquarium. So today I want to talk to you about, first of all, how anaerobic and low oxygen filtration works in substrate beds. So a lot of people don't realize this, but your substrate can actually be the biggest part of your filtration, along with the surface area on your plants and hardscape and glass. You can go without a filter or of any sort and just use substrate. And there are people out there like Father Fish, like the Diane Wallstead method, the deep sand substrate method that Father Fish uses. There's people like Kevin Novak and his biocenosis or BSB baskets, and he even goes as far as anoxic and ion bonding and all sorts of filtration that utilizes bonding ammonia into a little vessel and sequestering it rather than utilizing it just in plants. But he has other methods there. There's undergravel plenums. So this video is going to encompass a little bit about, we're going to talk first about that low oxygen filtration and what's going on there, just in case you're new to it. And then we're going to talk about aquasoil, because through all the people I've talked to, it's become abundantly clear to me anyhow that there's no one right way, but the easiest way to achieve the most benefits in a system, and we'll go over what those benefits are and what the downsides are as well of using aquasoil. Is using aquasoil. So first of all, it must be said that most of us are used to putting in fish food into our aquarium, right? You put in fish food, you put in fertilizers for your plants. Anything you put in has to either become plant matter or a fish growing, or it becomes waste in the aquarium, right? And a lot of people, myself included, are fans of allowing that waste to turn into mulm. So you just don't overfeed, you feed quality food, and you allow that to settle into your substrate and actually become layers of your substrate. And over time, you'll have a layer that is now below the oxygen level. And that allows your plants to then all of a sudden utilize waste and ammonia in ways that it couldn't before. And in different pathways than it would normally, with different bacteria than it would normally in a aerobic or oxygen-rich environment, like a tank with, say, only an inch or two of stone or gravel as the substrate and a hang-off-the-back filter. If you're running a tank like that, you're using filtration that's mostly going on in your filter media above in your filter, and you've got the beneficial bacteria. And if, of course, you know the nitrogen cycle, which is you have your fish create ammonia when they go to the bathroom, or when plants die and things break down and decay, ammonia is one of the toxic things that they produce, and we need to get rid of it. And the most common way that most people get rid of it is by doing water changes. Well, if you watch my channel, you know that I don't do a whole lot of water changes. I do water top-offs. And the reason I can do that is because of how I keep my substrate and how many plants I grow. So you know, in the beneficial bacteria cycle, you've got ammonia, which gets turned into nitrites by a bacteria's form. And then over time, that gets turned into nitrates. So your nitrites become nitrates. And that gets progressively less toxic to your fish and or shrimp being very sensitive to it. And that's when your tank is quote unquote cycled or safe for fish. Well, you can buy substrates, whether they have ammonia or nitrogen in them, an active substrate, versus substrates that don't have that are aqua soils. And any substrate like sand, stone, fluorite, glass pebbles, things like that, those are inactive substrates. And we're not really going to be talking much about those today, because you can build those up by allowing your waste and mulm to form layers like it would naturally out in the wild. And you can then create filtration there, but that takes a long time, and you should probably be running a filter or a very, very light bio load in the meantime, or a whole lot of plants and fertilizers, and you don't have anything for those plants to thrive off of. So I like using a soil base or an organic base for the plants to grow from day one. So I can have lots of plants from day one, and within a few weeks I can add my fish and shrimp, if not right away. Now, if you're curious about active versus non-active substrate, I have whole videos on that. And same with things you can do to put fish in quicker if you're using an active substrate that has that ammonia that plants like to feed off of to grow, and you decide to cap your substrate. There's lots of reasons why people add a layer of sand in a 1/2 inch or inch, 2 inches, whatever it may be. I have a whole video called to cap or not to cap, and that'll all be pinned in the comments below. But today, let's go over why I find aqua soils to be such an incredible innovation in the hobby, and why I didn't quite understand just how amazing they are and the potential that they have in a small space that I've been misusing, and I think most of you might have been misusing as well, because the science of just what is going on in that soil had not been done until very recently. And it was thanks to Dr. Tom Barr, who is the guy behind the Barr Report. If you're into aquascaping, he's a world-renowned aquascaper and professor in Central California of ecology and botany and the whole aquatic plant world. He's going to literally write the book on it. And so I've been talking with him, and some of the things that he said were pretty surprising and, dare I say, controversial on the internet these days. So with all these systems floating around of how you want to manage your waste in your tank, that waste is also what grows your plants, right? So in these systems like deep substrate and things, you're going to allow that waste to accumulate. You're not going to be gravel vacking, and you're going to feed usually a pretty low amount of food to your fish. Well, over time, that waste will filter down through Brownian motion, and it will become stratified in layers, as I said. And then in the anoxic layers, plant roots of aquatic plants actually prefer to feed off of ammonia. Now, most of us feed them nitrates because it's less toxic to our fish, and we're feeding them in a totally aerobic or oxygen-rich environment for the sake of our beneficial bacteria, so that our ammonia doesn't build up. But if you can trap it down in the substrate, you can actually then have layers of that ammonia, which helps the plants grow even better, and all sorts of other micronutrients and things in a layer separated from the water column, so that it keeps your fish safe, but it keeps your plants very healthy. And that's what a lot of people are trying to do in a lot of different ways. And it turns out that Aquasoil, especially the quality brands, there may be low quality ones out there that aren't as effective, but that is what they do. They actually allow the anoxic, or it may not be quite anoxic, which means there's no oxygen available even in molecule form, but at least anaerobic. So anaerobic at the core, so every little pellet at the core of those little pellets of Aquasoil is oxygen free, but the water still seeps in, and there's actually bacteria that lives in the center. A lot of those also have been coated in bacteria, and on the outside there is a rich surface area of beneficial bacteria that is living in your open water column. And there is a study I want to show you that somebody just demonstrated very nicely, where you can see here how much water penetrates Aquasoil. And this is why people decide to cap Aquasoil sometimes, is they don't want this. They don't want the ammonia in the Aquasoil mixing with the water column and therefore getting to their fish. But in just 60 seconds, look how far in fluval stratum the blue dye has seeped. It has gone all the way down 3 inches into the substrate. And if you look at other versions of this, in sand, it takes up to 120 days for it to even reach an inch. So you're getting quite the cap, quite the layer in dense layers of mulm and other things. When they test it with diffusing dye through it, it's clear that the water, and therefore also oxygen too, albeit that dye particles are larger than oxygen, they're not moving around and seeping into those parts of your tank. And so let's talk about the benefits and the controversy of, why these Aquasoils are actually pretty amazing, in that they have created an entire deep substrate ecosystem in a pellet. So let's talk about the benefits and some of the drawbacks. And right now, I just want to tell you, if you enjoy these deep dives and you're still with me here, I really appreciate it. But if you could hit that like button, it definitely helps spread the information to others. And also it will, help the channel grow, and we can pass on information that is scientifically accurate and fact-checked by experts. And you can do with that what you will. So there's not necessarily a right way. I'll say it again. There's not necessarily a wrong way, but there are some ways that end up in bad results for our fish and plants. But you can keep things however you like. My goal is to provide the science for you. And it turns out that more than 50% of you aren't subscribed. And those of you who are subscribed, only 20% of you have the little bell icon on. So if you could hit the thumbs up, and if you're subscribed, turn the alerts on if you're so interested. I would really appreciate it. It really helps the channel and these videos that, they're not like Mr. Beast videos full of action and excitement. So let's jump in right now to the benefits and the science you may not know about in those little pellets that have been engineered by botanists, ecologists, and soil scientists for decades now, both in agricultural business and in our aquarium hobby. But really, it's the agricultural business and hydroponic growing, aquaponic growing business that is funding this heavy-duty science, because it's expensive, and the work has been done now very recently. It's very impressive, like the ADA Aqua Design Amano Amazonia substrate. It is pretty incredible. In a few millimeters, they have both the anaerobic deep substrate effect in the center of the pellet, and that allows for redox, that allows for heavy metal and mineral fixing in the plant's little nutrient-seeking roots. And then on the outside, it allows for the plant to have aerobic or oxygenated growth, and it allows the bigger roots to grow around, grab hold, and put off more of those feeder roots, which then tap into more of those little particles or little pieces of the pellets. So in the center of those pellets is the magic. Let's talk about it. All right, so in the center where all that magic's going on, what it is it's a layer of earth that's been compressed, and usually it's volcanic ash and some sort of soil. And in an active substrate, it's actually already full of ammonia and, manganese, magnesium, all the different sorts of minerals your plants need to thrive. So you don't need to be putting a whole bunch of root tabs in. You don't need to be water column dosing necessarily if you're doing a low light or a medium light tank. Now, if you're doing really high light stuff with, really sensitive plants, then you may be running CO2. You may be running very high lights. And then you very well may want to be doing EI, or estimative index dosing, where you add each element each day or every week. However you want to do it, there's lots of methods. We're not going to get into that today, but needless to say, those pellets, when you buy the active type, and I have a whole video on active versus inactive substrate, again, it's pinned below, and you can decide that on your own. But if you have an active substrate, it's going to take a lot longer to cycle your tank to be safe for your fish and shrimp, because that is going to off gas, and it's also going to absorb into your water column. So here comes the big benefits of those aqua soils, and that is, one, that they're made out of a volcanic ash. Specifically, a lot of them are made from Mount Aso, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, ASO, in Japan, which is an incredibly mineral-rich and active volcano, one of the biggest active volcanoes in the world. And it spews out all this material that would make for the luscious valley of growing for agriculture. And that is true in our aquariums too. Our aquatic plants want the same things. So this soil is gathered, and in quality products, including fluvalstratum as well, which is not active. They have not soaked it already with ammonia and nitrogen compounds. But over time, the center of those pellets will actually absorb the waste from your water column, from your substrate, and from your fish going to the bathroom, and the little particles that settle down there. They will absorb that and become charged, and then your plant roots will work their way into the center there, and there will be bacteria growing in there. And the bacteria that lives in the center of the pellets is the same bacteria that lives in a lake bed or a river bed that's considered a deep bed or a natural bed, or even like a Wallstead tank. So when you get down below the oxygenated layer, you get the anaerobic bacteria that lives there, and it works completely differently than taking ammonia and making it safe into nitrates. It actually takes nitrates and, using a little bit of sulfur and a little bit of iron, which happen to be in most of these aqua soil pellets, it actually turns it back into ammonia. So it turns nitrates into ammonia, which your plants then can use in an oxygen reduced or very, very low to no oxygen environment. Your very tiny plant roots will break into those pellets slowly, and yet the pellets are big enough at anywhere from 2 to 8 millimeters, with 6 millimeters being optimal, They are big enough that plant roots can grow and grab a hold, the big roots will, and they'll get the macronutrients out of the water. Things like nitrates or ammonia that they want right away, things like CO2, things like oxygen and respiration that's going on up higher in the plant. All that's going on into the water column. Meanwhile, over time, especially trace minerals like metals, they can only be sequestered and made metabolizable to your plants in those oxygen-free regions. And that can be as little as 0.5 millimeter that your plants actually bring around it, and the bacteria that works hand in hand with your plants, your mycorrhizal relationship with fungi, bacteria, archaea, this all goes hand in hand, and they exchange nutrients. So sometimes bacteria will get, sugars or different proteins and things, and they will trade, for instance, magnesium or sulfur or nitrogen that's usable to the roots of your plant. And it's an incredible thing to see, and every plant is different, every ecosystem is different. But back to the pros of using this stuff we call aqua soil. So the aqua soil, because it's volcanic soil, it tends to have a pH of around 6.5 to 6.8, which means that it's going to buffer your water and keep it right around 150 to 200 TDS with your general hardness. And that is going to cause your aquarium to be much more safe for your fish, in that as CO2 levels go up and down in the day and night, with your plants putting out oxygen in the day, CO2 at night, after they're done photosynthesizing, it then creates a shift in your pH in your aquarium. And if you have a buffer of GH and KH in your aquarium, it makes it safer for your fish, and also it's just better for your plants too to have a stable environment. So those pellets and those substrates are going to keep your water buffered so that you don't get pH swings, be it from the plants and the CO2, or injected CO2 if you're doing pressurized CO2, or if it's just you're doing water changes and your water, tap water, is different or fluctuates. So that's one big plus. Another one is that they're compressed. So they have tons of surface area if you look at them under a microscope, and there's tons of minerals and all sorts of nutrients that plants need in those. Every single little granule is like a root tab that you would add to a gravel substrate in a normal aquarium. So while some people really want to get things going and they want things to be basically on steroids, so they'll add root tabs to their aqua soil already, you don't have to necessarily. It's already in there. And by feeding a good diet to your fish, they'll get things like trace amounts of phosphates, and they'll get minerals, things like calcium, manganese, magnesium, zinc. All those things can accumulate in your tank over time. And a lot of the methods out there take time to build up a rich and level substrate that will help with the filtration, but also help with that nutrient package for your plants, while also keeping the water safe for your fish. The nice thing about the aqua soil is it does all of that on its own. And you could get the same effects from a deep substrate sand tank after all the debris has worked its way down there through Brownian motion and settling. And that can take 3 months, 6 months, a year. It really depends on your tank and what's in it, and your microbiome as well as your microorganisms. But those little spheres have a lot of space around them because they're pelletized. So they have all the beneficial bacteria. So it's making sure your fish are safe from the ammonia, while then any ammonia that's there is being converted, or the nitrates and nitrites that are floating around in your water that are safer for your fish are being converted into ammonia in the center of the pellets. So it gives both food types to your plant at the same time in an inch or two of substrate, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. And It's why they engineered it that way. The other thing is, if you wanted to use soil, your plants would grow in it, and that's fine, but sometimes it's hard to get them to start rooting, and so aqua soil also is very easy to get your plants started in, to get a stem and to feed it in an inch or so with tweezers or your hand, and move plants around. In dirt, you'll see that it becomes a cloud in your aquarium very quickly. It gets muddy and murky, and while it may have everything you need, even if you use gravel over time, whether you have the dirt that has everything you need or the gravel that has none of the nutrients, it's going to build up mold and detritus and stuff from your aquarium, from your fish going to the bathroom, your plants dying, protein layers, excess food, snail poop, shrimp poop, whatever it may be. And that's going to go all over the place if you move around your plants. Well, in aqua soil, it already has that stuff that is rich and that encourages plant growth and life. So you can gravel vac if you choose to and keep it pretty dust free while it still maintains having all of that for your plants. Likewise, if you're growing lots of plants and you're trying to sell them or split them, propagate them quickly, you can move them all around and you won't cloud up the water or all of a sudden so-called burst the seal on your cap and release ammonia into your aquarium, causing your fish to die or your shrimp to die. So it allows for a lot more versatility in moving plants around as well. Now, I like to, just for the sake of things settling, I put a layer of gravel or stone, little pebbles, river, rock, at the very bottom of the entire aquarium, and then I do 2 or 3 inches of the aqua soil, and I do a cap sometimes, sometimes I don't. Now, ideally, if I have the money, one of the downsides of the aqua soil is it can be a little pricey. That's because they're getting 2 types of soil. They're getting a rich, mineral-rich soil, and then they're also getting a soil that's a lighter, fluffy soil that encourages the bacterial growth. So one is for the oxygen-free bacterial growth and the ammonia storage, and it's like a clay that bonds with it, actually in a charged ionic way as well. The other layer is a layer that's similar to dirt, but it's just pressed around the pellet. And over time, it does break down, which is another downside, but it could be anywhere from 18 months. That's if you're growing like carpeting plants that have tons of tiny stems and they break up those pellets quickly and they're really nutrient intense and you're always trimming them like, twice a week or something. 2, if you have a low light tank, it may last you 5 or 6 years before those pellets break up. But either way, I put that layer of an inch or so of gravel so that there's some voids in between for both the mulm and silt and all the other nutrients and things to work their way down into that layer. And then it can be in there kind of sealed off from the rest of the stuff below the rest of the substrate so that it just doesn't get kicked up and cloudy when I move things around as much. Now, another big plus is that, you worry about ammonia getting kicked up. And like I said, that debris, those pellets break down over time as the roots grow into them. Well, it turns out that, those roots and things break down that into a dust, and then you've got your fish poop. So if you're not gravel vacuuming, which I don't like doing, I like allowing a natural layer to form, that still can be a toxic layer if it gets disturbed. It can have more ammonia than your water column would. And we can see that in the test of how water diffused through sand caps and through silt. Through silt, you only need like a 1/4 inch of very fine silt to seal off layers from one another to stop the water from exchanging ammonia quickly. So the cool thing about these buffered pH aqua soils is that they also, when you have a low pH, your aquarium water is all of a sudden much more able to withstand ammonia. So if you have a pH of 7, you can have a little bit of ammonia and it's toxic to your fish. However, once you go below 7 and you get into the 6.5 range or so, all of a sudden the ammonia all is evaporating off as a gas, and ammonia becomes ammonium in the water column and in the substrate, and it bonds to other things, and all of a sudden it becomes far less toxic, just like ammonia is more toxic than nitrates. It's the same exact idea, but it's pH dependent. So this is another reason why you don't want your pH to swing, and all of a sudden your ammonia level, which was not a big deal when it was really acidic, all of a sudden your tank gets more basic and your ammonia becomes really dangerous to your shrimp. So these pellets help stabilize that as well, because they're going to keep your tank slightly acidic, which is also what a lot of shrimp need. And it will also keep your TDS right around 150 to 200 for a prolonged period of time. For up to a year, it stays right around there. Now, the downside of it is definitely the price. That's a downside of it. The other downside of it would be that some people want to charge their substrate right away. And if you're not buying the active substrates with the ammonia already in them, then you're going to need to soak those pellets in some sort of fertilizer or nitrate-rich solution, or you put it in your tank and you allow your fish poo and stuff to build up in it and in the substrate and work its way into it through the water column over the course of months before it's at its peak performance for your aquarium. And that's where we would say your aquarium's cycled, but it's not seasoned. And I love how Corey Aquarium Co-op has been promoting that idea that you can have a safe tank for your fish, but it doesn't mean it's optimally running. And the other thing that the aqua soils provide is a living space for things all the way as big as little shrimp and fish to all the way as small as, bacteria, archaea, fungi, and all the things you need for a balanced biome that build up over time. Things like little tiny food, gamaris, little scuds, little seed shrimp, things like that, all can make a home in the substrate because of those voids. And so they worked out scientifically that the 4 to 6 millimeters is ideal, and that's why it usually comes in those sizes. Now, it can still be effective as small as 2 millimeters in diameter. You can still get that oxygen-free center, and that's why there are smaller versions out there. But they've found that for our plants and things, that the optimal size is going to be that 6 to 8 millimeter, that 4 to 6 millimeter, depending on what you want to do. Now, another thing is it does take longer in the active substrates, like I said, to become safe for your aquarium if you're not capping them. If you don't cap it with sand, you need to wait a bit longer because there's more ammonia in the water that could impact your fish and or shrimp. And you got to let that burn off. But that's a great time to load your tank with plants, and they'll take full advantage of that if you give them the light and stuff. But it can also spark algae if you don't know how to balance nutrients, light, CO2, and plant growth with your nutrients and everything. So through all of this, I hope you guys see now that the pellets are actually a way of replicating that same little microbiome that lives in a deep substrate tank in each little pellet, yet you can move it all around, you can reshuffle it, you can set it up on a ledge if you're aquascaping, and you still get those benefits for your plants, and yet you don't have the downside of it being free, it mucking up the water. The other thing is, if there's debris in the water and it's cloudy, it's going to impact how your plants photosynthesize. It's going to interfere with that because the light is refracting, absorbing on some things and scattering on others, and not as much energy goes into your plants. So it also helps with that. There are so many reasons why this was engineered very intelligently. And as much as I like to say Mother Nature's always right, it may be for nature, but nature doesn't mess with moving plants around and selling them every couple of weeks, and doesn't, put sensitive shrimp in with fish that live in, other parts of the world, and plants from, Asia and Africa and here and there, and everywhere, all living in the same tank. It's too small of a space to truly recreate nature. However, with a diverse microbiome, with a diverse microflora and fauna, and with a decent substrate, whatever you choose that to be, you can really have a stable and safe tank. I'm here to just say that a lot of experts are saying the best tank for plants, the best substrate style for plants is the aqua soils. And I think ADA Amazonia is a good one out there. You know, obviously no one's paying me or sponsoring this or anything. And I also like Fluval for the compromising on the price. And even though it's not an active substrate, you'll have to charge it over time with liquid fertilizers and or by your natural processes in your tank, creating creating ammonia, then nitrites, then nitrates, then your bacteria converts it back to ammonia, stores it in the little pellets. But overall, having that minerality for your plants is so beneficial compared to things like sand, which also sand may have your KH and GH in it a little bit if it's crushed coral, but that could also make your water very alkaline, very hard, and then it makes your ammonia more toxic. Same with if there's silica in your sand, it promotes diatom algae growth. So even though those aren't active substrates, certain types of sand, if you're not careful, have different properties that aren't always beneficial. So if you have a truly inactive like quartz sand or granite sand, then you're going to be okay, but you don't have those benefits of the nutrients for the plants. And through all of this, through talking to all the different specialists, I have a new winner, and that is the aqua soils if you're concerned about growing luscious plants. Now, they're going to last probably anywhere from 2 years to 3 years, and then you're going to need to replace it or top off a layer of another inch or two. And I have a video also on how to swap out substrate in a tank that's already established. So again, it'll be linked below. But you guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for having an open mind. Try it out. Let me know what you think. I have nothing against the other methods, the BCB or BSB baskets and the biocenosis system, the Novak system, or undergravel plenums, deep substrate. I still like doing lasagna tanks because I think they look cool with different layers. And, you know, building that naturally over time, there's things to be said for that, or Wallstead tanks. But to keep it simple, stupid, to keep it easy if you're new to this, or if you've been doing it a long time, the science is in that all that stuff is going on within those little pellets. And that's incredible. And I have to say a big thanks to Tom Barr again for sharing all that published information with me and images and things, because years of his life and other people's lives went to figuring that out to know for sure if what they thought was going on was actually going on. All right, guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of this deep dive. I will see you next time, and have a wonderful day. Bye.